Did you know that there's a lot of different network types? Well, you're about to actually find out all about them next.
You're watching IT Pro TV.
Well, there are a lot more different network types than when I began, and here to actually tell us more about them is going to be Mr. Wes Bryan. Wes, when I first started networking, there were like 3 types. Now there's like at least a handful.
That's right, there are. Yeah, there are. And what we're going to do in this episode is help you to be able to identify those different network types so that if you're in a certification endeavor, you'll be able to get them right. If you're in a support endeavor and maybe you're just having a conversation with the IT team, you'll be able to have that conversation.
All right, sounds like a lot for us to cover, so head on over to the bench.
All right, everyone, come on over here and join me. And I've gone ahead and this is really going to be some diagrams because when we start mentioning the various network types that we have, it really just seems like a whole bunch of acronyms, right? Like for instance, the very first one, PAN. When we talk about pan, I think about something that we cook in. Maybe some of you know Peter Pan, you know, maybe you're thinking of that character, but what is a PAN? Well, a PAN is what's known as a personal area network. And a personal area network is one of the smallest network types that we have. And it typically is something like a computer, maybe a wired printer connected to the computer, maybe a webcam connected to the computer. So it's all of what a single person would use. Think about it as in maybe their cubicle at their desk, right? That forms a personal area network, and it's one of the smallest ones that we have today, and it's one of the ones that I would be able to identify.
Yeah, so the idea of that trying to essentially for us categorize each different network type is allowing us to focus in more on the technology and less on trying to figure out everything else. So what we want to talk about next then is probably the confusing one for a lot of people is the idea of a local area network. How is that really different from the idea of a PAN?
Sure. So this is one of the most popular network types that we have today, and a LAN is what is known as a local area network. Let me give you an example. It is a self-contained network, and the specific here for you is to keep in mind that it is a network in a single geographical location, and that's the big one. So if we take something like a company has a series of computers, they got a series of network devices, and we get all the way up to the edge of their network, maybe before they go out to the internet. All of that computer technology, all of the networking technology is what is known as a local area network. Again, it is a single geographical area, and I want you to be able to remember that and identify that whether you're on a certification endeavor or maybe you're support staff and you are having a conversation with your IT team.
Yeah, a lot of times with these types of local area networks, what we also tend to see in like IP addressing is that this will probably be represented most of the time by those private IP addresses instead of a public IP address, each device inside of a LAN, right?
Definitely, and I like what you said there, Ronnie, too, because that's another thing to keep in mind. These are private links, right? All the connections are owned typically by, let's say, your organization. Your organization, they have a series of computers, they have a series of networking devices that attach to those computers and cables. Those are all private links. Your company, your corporation owns those. They are the ones that put them in place, and they are the ones that maintain them. Again, keeping in mind that it's a single geographical location.
All right, we have that idea of a LAN down probably pretty well, but you also have on your list VLANs. How are we going to differentiate that from a LAN?
Well, a VLAN is a little bit different because when we look at a VLAN is what's known as a virtual local area network. And a virtual local area network, really, if you have to think about it, it's the way to divide a switch into multiple switches. Let me show you what I mean. We use these commonly today to be able to group a series of devices within a switch and combine them in a way that they can only communicate with other devices that are in that same grouping. That becomes what's known as a VLAN. Notice that we got a single switch, but we have 3 VLANs. Maybe I have some workstations and some printers, and I don't want every device within my network to be able to talk to my servers, right? Maybe security purposes, maybe compliance purposes. So in a managed switch, you can configure where a group of ports are like their own isolated local area network. That's why we call it a virtual local area network, because it's done in software. For instance, we need our voice over IP phones to be able to operate efficiently and quickly, right? No delay in communications. Well, one of the things that we can do is we can create a VLAN, and we can actually just go ahead and put them within their own virtual local area network. The big takeaway for a VLAN is just to be able to remember that it's a way we can take a managed switch and treat it like it's multiple switches. And it's a great technology today, because if we didn't have this technology and you needed multiple, if you will, VLANs, and you didn't have that, think about it, you'd have to buy another switch. Every time you wanted to create another one of these groupings, I'd have to go out and buy another switch. But with managed switches today and the software that runs on them, we can actually use software to divide them up and treat them as though they are different switches altogether.
Yeah, with that, that's kind of really a good business savings for a company. Instead of buying 3 different switches, to actually be able to buy one managed switch, maybe a little bit expensive at the beginning, but then you can actually chop it up logically and divide up what you need to, and really only have to manage one device instead of multiple devices as well. All right, now that we kind of understand that idea of the LAN a little bit more, and that that PAN as well, and even VLANs a little bit, we need to talk about how that skips us to the realm of a WAN, a W-A-N.
Yeah, there we go. So when we talk about the WAN, we're talking about a wide area network. Now, it's interesting because this uses a combination of public and private links. Public links being typically the ones that are owned by the ISPs, and private links, ones that are owned by the corporation. Well, where are the private links set? Well, a WAN typically spans multiple geographical locations, and a lot of times we use it to connect multiple local area networks together, right? So for instance, remember our LAN 1 here. We've got a series of computers. Let's say maybe we've got a series of computers in Boston. Maybe we've got a series of computers over in Tampa, right? And we connect them with ISP links, and the whole entire network, if you will, becomes what's known as a wide area network. So 2 of the key takeaways when we're comparing LAN and WAN: LAN, single geographical location; a WAN, typically multiple geographical locations, and it also uses public links provided by the ISP, or your internet service provider.
Yeah, this is actually probably one of the more useful, I shouldn't say useful, it's probably one of the more prevalent technologies that you will end up a lot of times having to at least understand what is happening when people say they can't get connected out to the internet. It could be an issue with the WAN link that you actually have, or it could be something on the internal side as well. Now, Wes, the next one here is a MAN, an M-A-N. What is that?
That's a metropolitan area network, and this is where it starts to get a little confusing, right? WANs typically span farther than a city, and that's one of the things to keep in mind. A lot of times your WANs, they can go cross states, all right? A MAN doesn't. When we talk about a metropolitan area network is a group of devices that communicate across the city. All right, that's a metropolitan area network, but it doesn't span past the city's boundaries typically. That's a metropolitan area network, where the WAN can go beyond the city limits, can go beyond the state limits, even beyond international limits when it comes down to it. MANs do not. Metropolitan area networks are ISPs providing connectivity within city limits.
Yeah, this is kind of neat because it allows then for maybe in a certain geographical location around the idea of the city limits to have super high speed connections, but then it also fits into WANs for cities that actually, may actually go across different geographical boundaries as well. So they all kind of are interdependent in that way. Our last one here, Wes, is a SAN.
All right, this is what's known as a storage area network, and one of the big things about a storage area network is it really is a large network that is used. It uses a few things. For instance, I can show you just a basic type of storage area network. It uses highly optimized, a lot of times fiber optic communications, specialized switches that are connected to these large storage arrays, right? And the whole entire network, that fabric and all of high-speed fiber communications, very specialized switches, becomes what's known as a storage area network. Now, Ronnie, I didn't put this one in the list, but I do want to go ahead and just briefly talk about this one, because this is one, and I don't know if you were like me, but I would see a SAN, and then I would see this thing called a NOS, and I'm like, well, what did they do? Just reverse the acronym? And essentially they did. A storage area network is used in enterprise-level environments where they need high-speed, very low latency access to the storage devices that they're connected to. We're talking about high enough speeds that you could do things like electronic fund transfers and you don't see a delay. It is very expensive technology. However, if you're a smaller business and you can't afford the hundreds of thousands of dollars that it could potentially take to spin up a whole storage area network, then what you could do is you could put a highly optimized, dedicated single device within your network, what's known as a network attached storage device. Ladies and gentlemen, just keep in mind that what we're talking about here is nothing more than like a file server. It is a device that has a small footprint, highly optimized operating system on it, and a bunch of storage drives in it that has a network connection, typically gets an IP address, and the users within your networks can store and retrieve information on this. This is a extremely lower cost implementation if you cannot afford a storage area network. I went ahead and put this one in there because if it shows up, I want you to be able to explain it. I want you to be able to identify it. Remember, storage area networks, highly optimized, fiber optic communications where you need low latency, fast speeds, very expensive, done in enterprise level networks. Network attached storage, it could be a small office, home office. It could be just a medium-sized business. They could afford that type of storage, and it becomes really nothing more than like a file server. But it's a dedicated device just being used for storage. These are some of the varieties of network types that I would be able to identify, whether you're in a certification exam or you're just in a support role. If you can do that, you're going to be successful.
Thank you for watching IT Pro TV.